All right, welcome back to the Optimistic Fan Club. It is Friday. That is why you've caught me in the casual Friday shirt. I apologize. It's terrible. My brother gave it to me. This is a special episode because it's basically going to be a 30 to 40 minute rant. I don't know. Maybe we'll cap out at 20, but we are talking Shedeur Sander's speeding ticket. Maybe the only quarterback on the planet right now who makes national news for speeding. And this is the main thing with this, as our outro song fades out here, or intro song rather. The takes completely lack nuance that you're hearing from the unhinged far sides, and particularly Colin Coward. And let's finish up the intro right here. Colin Coward comes out and he says that he's done with Shedeur Sanders because he was caught driving 101 miles an hour in a 65 mile per hour interstate in the middle, not the middle of the night, but at 12:30 at midnight. So to make a statement like that is so egregious that it can really only boil down to one thing. Colin Coward knows what he's doing. He's creating headlines, he's making a statement, and he's setting a precedent within his own take that he will be able to revert to. Because this is the thing with Colin Coward. He came out and he said, Baker Mayfield, I think he's talented, but he's immature. Which was true because Baker Mayfield was caught on camera running away from the cops while drunk, and he got slammed into a wall and it looked like he might have broke his ribs. It was crazy. If you remember that video, you know what I'm talking about. And this was my main tweet in response to Colin Coward. Colin Coward was vehemently opposed to Baker Mayfield as a franchise quarterback and a number one overall pick when that happened. Rightfully so, for being the number one overall. Because he got into a direct confrontation with law enforcement and tried to break the law while he was under questioning for, I forget what it was, if it was public intoxication, whatever it was. It was bad and it was on camera. This is a completely different set of circumstances. But just back to Colin Coward really quick. He positions himself in saying that he's done with Shedeur Sanders on a very minute issue, and not the act itself. Speeding is wrong. We're going to get into my opinion on speeding. Shocker, I don't necessarily agree with it, as most people would rationally agree with that point. But Colin Coward will make a very base level stance of like, I don't think that that's what a franchise quarterback does. And then he'll wait for 6 months when there's no controversy, and then I'll come out and be like, you see, he matured, and now I'm with him. That is the kind of posturing that Colin Coward makes and that the national media makes in general, because it is, we also have to build context into this kind of take when it's that absurd. And with people going up in arms about it, it is June. Mini camp is over. Training camp is still weeks away. There is nothing in the news cycle, so this falls into their lap. They can build an entire segment on it. I know I'm hypocritical in the sense because I'm reacting to a reaction, but whatever. This is relevant to the Browns and this community in general, the Optimistic Fan Club community. But all that goes on. It's a very hollow take. I don't think Colin Coward agrees with that or even believes in what he's saying. I think that he's stirring things up and he's building a narrative that he can then come back to over time, the same way he did with backwards hat guys, quarterbacks at the podium in press conferences who wear their hat backwards, all that kind of weird stuff. It becomes these mini talking points that is actually very clever branding and marketing for who Colin Coward and the herd is. They're his standards. They're his little idiosyncrasies in what he perceives to be the attributes of a franchise quarterback. So let's get into the specific issue, though. So Shedeur Sanders gets caught speeding. 101 miles an hour in a 65 or a 60, regardless, way over the limit, like 30 plus miles over the limit. That is not a great look. However, this is where I'm going to be the defense lawyer here. If there was a time to speed as a young person with a lot of money and a really fast, souped up car, when would that time be to go and do that? Would it be during rush hour in the middle of the day when the highway is crowded and there's women and children riding on the road and it's not a place with lots of open lanes? Is that the time to do it? Or would it be at 12:30 at night in Ohio when no one is out there other than cops looking to fill a quota and catch people for ultimately breaking the law, breaking traffic rules? They're completely justified in doing that and doing their job. And they should be doing that and doing their job because it keeps the road safe. But like everything in life, there's nuance to all of this. When would be the time to drive your car fast? It would be at night on an open road. That is probably the best time to do it. And that is not me justifying the actions whatsoever. But let's go a step deeper. If you have ever driven in the Cleveland area, here are a couple things that you'll notice. And I do not live in Cleveland now. I lived in Cleveland for a little bit. My family lives there. So I'm there. I've driven I-90 a million times. I've been all around the suburbs in that area. You know what you see on every single highway, whether you're driving to Lakewood or Cleveland Heights? A broken down car on the side of the road. Why? Because someone was driving without insurance and had to leave it on the shoulder so they didn't get busted. You see that. You see people constantly switching lanes and weaving in and out of traffic without signaling. And that is any time of the day, no matter how busy the roads are. That is extremely, extremely dangerous. You also see on every highway, not just in Ohio, but in the world, you see every single day, whenever you are on the highway, somebody speeding. And that's the thing about traffic violations and driving in general. There is nuance to all of this. You know why Shedeur Sander's car was not impounded and that he didn't receive a roadside suspension immediately and his car wasn't towed away? Is because it was on an empty road in the middle of the night. There's nuance to all of this. Being Rashi Rice in Texas and essentially drag racing in Ferraris or Lambos or whatever car they were in that is souped up and is essentially a Formula One beast out there on the road, causing injuries and actually causing crashes that leave innocent bystanders injured and hurt. Like, that is a different story than receiving a ticket for driving fast on an open road. And additionally, I want to point to this. Shedeur Sanders, if you watch the body cam footage, very respectful, very understanding of his fine, and moved on and didn't protest it at all. More news comes out, and he had additionally received a fine for driving 91 in a 60. Is it good that he had 2 traffic violations, 2 speeding tickets within a 2-week spell? Absolutely not. That is not what this is. People also have tried to equate this to Henry Ruggs, who was A, drunk, B, driving 154 miles per hour, and C, caused the crash that led a woman and her dog to burn alive in their car. That is so far removed from somebody making a calculated risk driving on an open road fast, which is exactly why you buy fast cars. He is the only one paying for the consequences of his decision. And that's the reality. And once again, something could have happened without a doubt, but it did not. So the fact that this is making national news is just a complete indication that the media's news cycle is so starved right now because we're in that transition period and all that's really going on is baseball and the NBA finals, which no one seems to care about. But I want to go to this. It's like, ultimately, at the end of the day, with all of this, you know what the clear indication is? And I said this on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter or X, whatever you call it. It's linked down below. Lots of great tweets there. You know why this isn't an issue? Because corporations do not take risks on the people they sponsor. the second there is a whiff of controversy, of anything negative that could impact their brand and paint them in a light that they sponsor people who are irresponsible or dangerous to their brand integrity, they remove themselves. They stop working with them. We see this constantly. Whenever there's allegations of any sort, we see brands pull back and abandon the people who they once sponsored. And not even that there's ill will necessarily. They just know they cannot take the risk in standing with those type of people. There has not been a single sponsor of Shedeur Sanders, and there will not be a single sponsor of Shedeur Sanders who will have to make a statement regarding the traffic violations. And I mean preemptively making those statements. I'm not talking about, say it's whatever, name a brand that he's with, Gatorade. Gatorade isn't going to have to come out and be like, we're really looking into this issue and we're going to try and resolve this matter. And we've stepped away from Shedeur Sander. Like, that is not going to happen. They're not going to have to talk about this at all. Somebody within the business might be asked about it by paparazzi and they'll say no comment and move on. It's like, well, was he speeding in a school zone? Was he doing it during rush hour when there were cars all over the road? Was he drag racing? Was he criminally speeding? No, he was driving at a speed that most people have touched at some point in their life. And once again, I'm not justifying doing those things, but I've said it 50 times already. And I'll say it again. There is nuance to the context in which these things occur. So does speeding within the context of Shedeur's violation, not this grand overarching idea of he was driving 100 miles an hour on the highway. He was driving 100 miles an hour on a highway in the middle of the night in Ohio, in the suburbs of Cleveland. Like, very, very, very different than, like we said, speeding like Rashi Rice on the highway in Texas and causing a collision and leaving people injured. Very, very different. Does that context of speeding equate to immaturity? It might just be a guy who likes to drive his car fast, the same way Myles Garrett likes to drive his car fast and who flipped his car in a single car crash, driving his Porsche 120 miles an hour. It's like that putting yourself to the point where you've created self-harm and you're injured and you're playing essentially with one arm like he was when that happened, that is an immature decision. Absolutely. It was a poorly calculated risk that left him hurt and ultimately hurt his team. But they're trying to paint him like he's Ryan Leaf, who's crying in the locker room, being like, stop saying that to reporters and freaking out. It is not that. They're trying to paint him like he's Aaron Rodgers, who goes on national TV once a week on Pat McAfee's show and says some of the craziest stuff you will ever hear. And furthermore, like, look at Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods' body cam footage, toasted off of Xanax, off of Vicodin, THC in his system as well, getting pulled over and arrested, having to plead guilty to reckless driving and enter like basically a rehab program. Like, this right now is almost getting a news cycle akin to that situation with Tiger Woods. And ultimately, with those examples that I just gave you with Aaron Rodgers, with Tiger Woods, the difference is that those people have a resume of winning and people love a winner. And that's what this all comes down to. This is at a point where there's no follow-up game to right the wrongs inside people's head. There's no opportunity to go out and throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. There's nothing like that. So this is just going to live in perpetuity and will continue to be a storyline until training camp, and he'll be asked about and da-da-da-da-da. At the end of the day, if you perform well, really nobody cares whatsoever. Nobody cares whatsoever. Go read the Dallas Cowboys Boys Will Be Boys book and look at what some of those guys were up to. Look at the allegations against Peyton Manning coming out of Tennessee. If Deshaun Watson had come out and continued to be a top 5 quarterback, no one would have cared about those allegations. And I say no one very broadly. People absolutely would, and they are justified to feel that way. They have their own moral convictions and histories that would leave them very unhappy with that signing, and all the power to you. Great job for having your moral convictions. But in general, the 80%, the Browns fans, if Deshaun Watson comes out and he gets you to an AFC championship, if he consistently brings you to the playoffs, people aren't going to care. So this idea of maturity and leadership is all hinging on, do you win? Because once again, look at Baker Mayfield. He had the issues coming out of college, and he was ultimately driven out of Cleveland by immature decisions, by trying to tackle a guy and having his shoulder ripped out against the Texans. You know, go through the butterfly effect. Anthony Schwartz stops running his dig route. It gets picked off. We're not diving into that, but just the sense of like, you need to understand that you're a franchise quarterback. You need to understand that this isn't a good decision to make right now, to put your body on the line in a contract year. And once again with that, I know there are already people typing this being like, well, that's just, he's a good old boy because he's going to go out there and put his body on the line and play hard and blah, 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 blah. And that's admirable and that's commendable. No, it is not when it leaves you with a burn season because your quarterback can now not throw accurately because his lead shoulder is in a sling. When you are a winner, you get away with everything. You get away with everything, and the public will continue to love you. And right now, Shedeur Sanders has absolutely no platform to stand upon because he's viewed as a Nepo baby, even though he helped turn Colorado from a 2-win team into a 9-win team, even though he threw for over 35 touchdowns, even though he never once quit or tapped himself out, even though he got his ass handed to him all year behind a bad offensive line with no running game and no tight ends. He continued to go out there and fight. But that doesn't matter. The second you get a speeding ticket or two, which once again are not great personal individual decisions, but the context surrounding them definitely limits the severity of how those things should be taken. The second you do that, you're once again just a thug. You're a Nepo baby. You're all of these things that the media and your detractors can point to. And again, it might sound like all of this is an excuse for a decision. I understand the decision is immature. I understand that it's a bad decision that could have led to physical harm or something like that, but it does not make Shedeur Sanders an immature person, a bad person, or someone who's going to be incapable of learning from this mistake. And that was the biggest thing that I said within comparing everything. Baker Mayfield matured to a degree that now he is viewed as a top 10 quarterback in this league. And that was with how he handled himself with the media, how he carried himself off the field, and the way that his teammates just overall embrace him because they know who he is. Look at the way right now, and you're already seeing it, the way that the Browns embrace Shedeur Sanders. Every time somebody is mic'd up, they are talking with him. You're seeing the smile. You're seeing the way he conducts himself, the way he conducts himself in interviews, the way Mary Kay Cabot tries to bait him into these answers that are going to cause controversy, and he very swiftly sidesteps them and moves on. Hand any 23-year-old the amount of acclaim, fame, and money that this kid has, and you're going to have a lot worse outcomes than 2 speeding tickets. So let's keep all of that in mind as we try and paint somebody with a broad brush and say that they should be cut or that they're going to be cut from the team for this. It is the dumbest take you could possibly have within all of this. And like I said, just revisiting this, so much of this is tied up to people having different backgrounds. Like, just because you constitute a speeding ticket as indicative of low moral character, bad leadership, and being a bad person doesn't mean that that's what reality or the truth is. Look at Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter was speeding while, I think the day after the national championship, I forget exactly what the story was, but essentially because he was drag racing, caused an accident that left somebody dead. Even in that scenario, is Jalen Carter incapable of growing as a human being, of maturing and becoming a person who can actually help make the world a better place through donating to charity, through donating his time to helping the youth. There is so much that you can do to build within actual serious criminal charges that leave life lost. So if there's a room for that person in the NFL, and there's room for that person within society, which there should be, because, if you've ever been to church or you've ever picked up the Bible before, you know what every great man in the Bible was? Flawed beyond belief, adulterers, liars, stealing inheritances, deceiving their parents for their birthright. That is the reality of life. Everyone is perfectly imperfect. You have the ability to do right. And Shedeur Sanders, this is the final thing. And I know this is a lot of advocacy for him. I just don't like when people are painted with a broad brush off of something very minor in the context of everything going on in the world today. The dude has given more of his time, attention, and effort to the community within 4 months than 90% of the Browns roster has their entire tenures. And probably more than most people have in general throughout their careers. Like, we're talking about a future Walter Payton Man of the Year, potentially. That is what we're talking about. But that can all be ignored, and people are advocating for him to be cut, advocating for his voice to be silenced, and everything else that you're seeing on Twitter and in the media because of 2 speeding tickets. 2 speeding tickets. Not criminal speeding, not drag racing, not endangering human life or reckless driving. 2 speeding tickets. Okay? So keep that in your mind. It is so easy to be up in arms, but just remember, the media is profiting off of this story. It's helping them fill all their dead air, and it's helping them sell advertisements. So keep that in mind. With that being said, this was one of the rantier episodes. It was probably very annoying if you're not a Shedeur Sanders fan, but if they are going to besmirch a guy's name and try and make all this news and story about it, somebody should also be out there to defend this kid, because that's what he is. He's a kid. I'm 29 years old. Shedeur Sanders is a child. If you knew some of the things that 23-year-olds get up to, oh my goodness, like especially college football players, it's not great. It is not great. So with that being said, let's get out of here. If you hated this video, dislike it. If you liked it, like it. Be civil in the comments. This doesn't need to turn into a race war. This doesn't need to turn into anything. We are talking about traffic violations, my people. So with that being said, this has been the Optimist Fan Club. We'll probably have to follow this up at some point. Follow me on Twitter. If you want to listen to everything without any YouTube ads popping in, subscribe to the audio feed below. You can listen on iTunes, Spotify, all podcast platforms available down there. Consider buying a shirt at pumpkinhead.shop if you want to support us there as well. And we're going to have much more on the way soon. We will see you later, my friends.